one from home or from here? We'll leave it here. I can't remember.
Yeah, let's turn the front one on. Are you warm or?
I'm very comfortable.
Okay, fine then, we'll turn the front one on.
You can turn it off. I
That's
don't think
okay.
it's going to change too much.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not too hot. I'm just make sure everybody else is okay.
I'm standing, so I'm not going to fall asleep.
I'm not gonna fall asleep. I'll just keep taking stuff off. That's okay.
Actually, I'm not.
Have you seen anyone fall asleep standing up before?
Yeah,
No.
doesn't last long.
Yeah. They wake up on the way down.
Yeah, they either wake up as they go sideways or they. All right, 15 minutes. That seems to be our break time. All right, crossing the Jordan. Time had come. 40 years too late. Not too late. 40 years late. And the chosen place was north of the Israelite camp, so they marched north from Shittim, which is acacias. Oh, sorry, Rachel, can we just go back for 1 second? So they're about there. And there's acacia plantations there, and they just marched north a little, set up maybe there, a place that they called Gilgal. They crossed the Jordan River north of Jericho. I just said that, headed for the location which would be called Gilgal, and that became their base of operations throughout their military campaigns in Canaan. Israel crossed the Jordan River in the exact manner which God had commanded. So I think we all know that fairly well. The priests went into the water with the Ark of the Covenant, and the river just dried up. Once again, the spiritual primacy of the priests and the Ark of the Covenant was evident. That's Joshua chapter 3, verses 3 to 17. Let's say in verse 3, the officers are commanding the people who've been commanded by Joshua, who's been commanded by the Lord, and they commanded the people, saying, when ye see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. So they followed the Ark of the Covenant, and as I said, we do know what happened with that. The entry of Israel into Canaan, and then the first battle would both see the miraculous intervention of God. So it was a miracle in how they got across, and the first battle was also there was a great miracle involved in that. This was to help Israel to remember the Lord because of his great works on their behalf. And of course a pile of stones was set up on the riverbank, taken out of the river from where the ark was, standing there in the middle of the river, as a memorial of the hand of God working on behalf of his people by stopping the torrents of the flooded Jordan. That's in Joshua chapter 4, verses 21 to 24. Now, not like Moses, but he had neglected the token of circumcision during his first 40 years in the wilderness with his own sons. And he seems to have made the same mistake during his second 40 years in the wilderness too. None of the males who were born in the wilderness had been circumcised, even though the commandment to do so was in the law. This is one of those anomalies. The Lord instructed Joshua to call for a nationwide rectification of the matter, and this was promptly carried out. That's in Joshua chapter 5, verses 2 to 11. Israel would be right with God when it embarked on its campaigns of conquest, just as Moses had to sort things out before he went to Egypt and did that great work. Israel had to sort things out as well. Gilgal means rolling away, and Joshua chapter 5 verse 9 gives us the explanation of that. And the Lord said unto Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. So during the time in Egypt, it seems that circumcision had been let lapse as well. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. The children of Israel then kept the Passover at Gilgal in the plains of Jericho, Joshua chapter 5 verse 10, and the manna stopped. The Lord began to change how he provided for Israel. Now they would enjoy the fruits of the land. We see that in Joshua chapter 5 verse 12. Talks about a number of food-related things. I wanted to say, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. Interesting little episode at the end of Joshua chapter 5. During a reconnaissance of Jericho, Joshua encountered a stranger who stood against him with a drawn sword. This was the Lord Jesus Christ in a Christophany, an appearance of Christ before he was born. And he was the captain of the Lord's army. It's in Joshua chapter 5 verses 13 to 15. So what did Joshua say? He says, are you on our enemy's side or are you on our side? And the Lord said, no, you're on my side. That was the import of what was said. Christ led Israel in the invasion of Canaan, and he will lead the hosts of heaven in a similar campaign at his second coming. Although it will be much quicker the second time around. You know where it says, as the lightning moves from the east to the west, well, that tells you the direction that Christ will come into Jerusalem from. And it's going to be quick. Well, the fall of Jericho. We all know the story pretty well, but think of it this way. We have maps. All right, so Jericho was about there. There's a little prominence there, which means it wouldn't have gotten flooded when the Jordan flooded. So it's just up off the floodplain slightly, like Nowra. That's exactly why Nowra is where it is. And so I think they probably crossed about there actually, but really doesn't matter that much. I agree with that. Gilgal was about there, maybe a bit further up. Achan was stoned in that valley there. That's the valley of Achor when we get to it. Jericho was the first fruits event. Say that 5 times fast. The first city conquered inside the land of Canaan, and this had some important implications. Firstly, Jericho would be set forth as an example to both Israelite and Canaanite. The miraculous power of God demonstrated on the behalf of Israel was a clear indication of whose side God was on. What does it say in Joshua chapter 6 verse 2? And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valour. So God was on Israel's side. Secondly, the Lord required the first fruits at the hands of his people, just as he does with us. When I'm organised, I try to do my tithe first before I pay any other bills, just as a symbolic thing really, but it's the first fruit. Sometimes it doesn't happen because I'm not organised, but anyway. These are sanctified unto him. We see that in Leviticus chapter 23 verses 16 to 21. The first fruits are sanctified unto the Lord. The firstborn males of the children of Israel are a good case study of this requirement. A number of verses about that. Exodus 13, 12 to 15. Exodus 22, verse 29. Exodus 34, verse 20. Numbers chapter 3, verse 45. Chapter 8, verse 17. And chapter 18, verse 16. So there's a real study about those firstborn males being the first fruits and being redeemed and all sorts of things. Thirdly, the pattern of faith and obedience, even when the requirement seemed foolish, was instructive to God's people. Why would we walk around the city every day for 6 days and on the 7th day go around? What on earth was that all about? Israel walked around the city for 6 days in a row. People of Jericho had locked up the gates and they were ready for an assault or maybe a long siege. Let's say in Joshua chapter 6 verse 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none went in. It's pretty simple. They looked on from their city walls and it would have been a strange sight unfolding before them. If you were in Jericho, you would have been watching what are they doing? Hundreds of thousands of warriors, and they were not allowed to talk. Wouldn't work these days, the school children. Can't get 6 of them to walk in a line without talking, let alone 600,000. But they're walking around the city in a great column. In the middle of the column, there's the white-clad priests with... Well, they didn't know what was under the blue cloth, did they? They didn't know what the Ark of the Covenant was. And some type of shrine, they would have guessed. And there's other priests blowing ram's horns. This is all in Joshua chapter 6, verses 3 to 14. And then just as they'd gotten used to it, 6 days, on the 7th day, they do it 7 times. It would have all seemed very strange. Now the interesting thing was after the 7th time, they stopped and they actually formed a ring around the city. And then the priests blew the trumpets and the people shouted. And then the Lord tore down the walls of Jericho. So there's these, the Liberals can't believe that God did anything. They have to always have a naturalistic explanation for everything. And they say, oh, the sound reverberated at just the right pitch. And you've seen the reconstructions of the walls. Nothing would knock that down. Just fairy tales that the liberal scholars come up with because they can't believe the Bible. The Israelite soldiers moved into Jericho from all sides because they were on all sides. They just went, what does it say? The people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly just destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass with the edge of the sword. Joshua chapter 6, verses 20 to 21. Now somehow, somewhere in amongst it all, Rahab's house remains standing. So the 2 spies sought her out. They found the house with the scarlet line in the window, as they'd instructed her, and she was rescued along with her family. And she has to stay outside the camp because she's unclean for a period of time. And then Salmon, one of the spies, who was the son of the prince of Judah, the leader of the tribe of Judah previously, he took her as his wife. Now, all went well except for one man. And this is, yes?
Sorry, Jack, earlier you were talking about the ram's horn. There's a blank there. What is it supposed to be? He's talking about carrying the type of shrine covered by the cloth, while other priests blew, was it 7 ram's horn in front of it?
7.
7.
7 is correct. All right, that's okay. Fall of Jericho. Okay, Jericho has fallen. Do we have a map next? What's next? What's after that? Yes, that would be good. All right, so they're at Gilgal. There's Jericho. There's 2 roads leading west, one up to Beth Aven, one down to Jericho. That's where Ai was. They found Ai. They thought it was over there previously, but it was the wrong site and everything was wrong about it. They excavated this other one and then they realised that no, it's actually here. So you can see what the problem with Ai was. It blocks that road. And so what they did was they said, well, we'll take this one out and then we'll head this way. Except they hadn't figured on what Achan had done.
What's the red that I can't pronounce?
Kiryat El Makatir, that's Ai. That's the excavation of Ai. The Lord had promised the Israelites the riches of Canaan, land flowing with milk and honey, and all that he required was the first fruits. And Jericho was that first fruits. It's like your tithe. It's exactly the same thing. The Israelites were not to take anything from Jericho. The entire city was sanctified to the Lord and therefore cursed to the Israelites. Joshua said unto the people, shout, for the Lord hath given you the city, and the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed, when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. That's Joshua chapter 6, verses 16 to 19. And then verse 21 says, and they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. I feel like we've read that already. And they burnt the city with fire, and all that was therein, only the silver and the gold, and the vessels of brass and of iron, they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. That's verse 24. And there was even a curse on the man who would later rebuild the city. He laid down the foundations with sacrifice of one of his sons to Baal, and the gates went up as he sacrificed his youngest son to Baal. One man amongst the victorious Israelites would not listen, and by giving in to covetousness and taking treasures from Jericho, Achan had merely cursed himself and his family and excluded himself from the bountiful blessings which the Lord had in store. Thought he was going to rob God, he just robbed himself. Instead, he and his family were executed by the assembly of Israel in the valley of Achor. So if we just think maybe one more map. There it is. So, sorry, there it is. So Gilgal's there, and or maybe there, maybe Gilgal was there. They just went up into the valley of Achor and they stoned him. I've said about 5 kilometres northwest of Jericho. The Lord had, excuse me, valley of Achor, that means trouble. Achor means trouble, because he'd troubled Israel. And what did Joshua say? Now we're going to trouble you. The Lord had weeded Achan out from amongst the thousands of Judah. We know that process where they called the tribes, then called the families, and then it was Achan. He and his family were killed because they had transgressed the principle of the first fruits. They'd taken a deadly curse on themselves. They'd troubled Israel and caused God's anger to be kindled against Israel. Joshua chapter 7 verse 1. They also caused the defeat of God's people in battle, which wasn't supposed to happen. And they did cause the deaths of 36 men. Joshua chapter 7 verse 5, when that force went up to Ai and they were not able to stand before the men of Ai. A small force of 3,000 men was sent to take Ai. And I've talked about the fact that the city's on the blocking the Beth-aven road, leading westwards from Jericho. And the only other road slightly to the south was the Jerusalem road. So important to control both of those. Once Achan was dealt with, Joshua took the entire army up to Ai, laid an ambush, won the battle, and burnt Ai to the ground. We see that in Joshua chapter 8, verses 1 to 28. Do we have a picture next, Rachel? There it is. Okay. I think it's there. The ruins out there. So the excavation's going on there. So the Israelites approached along the road. The roads don't change much because they're the best place to put a road. And so the modern types just put down tar over the ancient pathways.
Had a lane.
Out of lane, yeah. Take away a lane. The main Israelite army came up the road to attack, but they'd already put an ambush force in this little valley here. And so when the rest got chased off, these guys came out, burnt the town, and the men of Ai are already down the road here chasing the Israelites. And Ai was destroyed.
Is this we're a little bit north, but is this like the floodplain and the to the left is the level of Jericho?
Let's just go back, Rachel. I think we've got... Okay, so Jericho is there. That's there. That's the floodplain. That's just up off it. This is a fairly steep hill, so you're up quite substantially by the time you get up to here. I think Jerusalem's...
So where we were just looking at was
Yep.
where on this map here?
All right, so Ai is up in this area.
Oh, okay.
Jerusalem's just back this way a bit. Jericho's there, so they've gone up the road. Maybe if we see the other map, Rachel. So Ai's there, Jerusalem's there. See where you can see where the terrain kicks in, the hills.
So that river, the Jordan River, was the Jordan River in the next picture? No.
Yeah.
Another way?
Oh.
Another one. Yeah, that
This one, no.
Where would it be? To the right?
Yeah, that way.
To the east?
That way. You're in the Jordan. You're in the Jordan. Yeah, well, probably actually more that way. This is the road. You can see the road heading back towards the Jordan. So maybe the road's the Jordan.
You need to take us on an excursion.
I think we need to go for a... I do know some people. A field trip, eh?
Yeah, great.
All right. So they destroyed Ai. And perhaps as a demonstration to the Canaanites that the defeated Ai was an aberration. And certainly to make the same point to the Israelites, they kept marching up into central Canaan and went to build an altar on Mount Ebal. That's Joshua chapter 8, verses 30 and 35. Joshua carved the law in stone and read it to the people. Do we have another photo? I didn't do it. I had a photo. Should have got Pastor Reeves. Funny coincidence. Pastor Reeves been showing the teens. He did the woman at the well, and Sychar is right next to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and he had this great photo taken from a drone, I think, or maybe a helicopter, and it showed the city of Sychar and Shechem, and then where the Greek Orthodox Church had put a church over the top of Jacob's well. But in the background you got Gerizim and Ebal, and you can see how it would work. I always wondered, how on earth did Joshua get the entire nation there on these two mountains, and how could they hear him? They're very close together, and it'd just be a perfect natural amphitheatre. So yeah, it does make sense. Anyway, he laid down the law on Ebal. After the issue with Achan, there was a special emphasis on the blessings and the cursings. Don't get that wrong again. All right, but then he got something wrong. The league with Gibeon. Israel's getting close to this. Actually, do we have a map? Is there one after this? No. Just go back one more. Yeah, keep going. And one more. That's the one. All right. So Gibeon is there. So they've just taken Ai. You can see why the Gibeonites are getting nervous. Now they come up here, destroyed Ai, then went all the way up to Gerizim and Ebal at Shechem. And they probably sighing with relief, but they're thinking they're next, and they're probably right. So you can understand why the Gibeonites did what they did. Hivites lived in Gibeon, and they realised that Israel would destroy them soon. And so in the interest of their own survival, they did that trick with the mouldy bread and the old clothes, and the Israelites were a bit careless, didn't check it out, and got tricked into making a league with them. Therefore the Israelites could not attack them. And uncharacteristically for Joshua, he did not consult the Lord before making the alliance, because the Lord would have told him, hey, they just live over there. And this league was bona fide because when King Saul broke it 450 years later, his house paid a heavy price for that breach of agreement in 2 Samuel chapter 21 verses 1 to 9. We see the punishment on the house of Saul for what he did. However, God did use this situation, even though Joshua messed up, but the Lord used this situation to gather the Amorites of the south together so that Israel could destroy them easily. So that was a good thing that came out of it, but it also became a model for how the Israelites later treated the defeated inhabitants of Canaan. Instead of killing them like they were supposed to, the Israelites enslaved the survivors. They carried water and what was the other thing? I forget what it was. But basically turned them into their slaves. The decision would come back to haunt the Israelites throughout the times of the judges. What it say in Judges chapter 2 verse 3. They shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. So the Gibeonite model was not a good model. But God used this particular situation to destroy the Amorites of the south. So the Amorites and the Canaanites were already in great fear of Joshua and the Israelites. We see that in Joshua chapter 10 verse 1. Now it came to pass when Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly. So fear is always a strong motivator. And when Gibeon makes peace with Israel, the situation becomes a full-blown crisis for Jerusalem. Oh, can we just go back to it? Is there one? Is there a map in front? No, I'm just after the one with... Yeah. Oh, yep, that'll work. Okay, so there's Gilgal, there's Gibeon, there's Jerusalem. So Gibeon has signed a peace treaty with Israel. Who's next? And perhaps they thought about the fact that, well, Ai actually defeated Israel, so maybe they're not invincible. The king of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem roughly means city of peace, Adoni-Zedek, the Lord of righteousness. Funny name for a wicked pagan king. He draws together this coalition of Amorite kings to the south of Jerusalem. In fact, all the major towns are on that map there. They brought their armies to attack the city of Gibeon, which was only 7 kilometres north of Israel. Now, the Amorite army included Anakim, giants. Joshua chapter 10, verses 21 to 23 tells us about that army. And the men of Gibeon send messengers to Joshua at Gilgal, and they immediately invoke this league which Israel had made with them. A bit like, NATO. If one gets attacked, then we're all at war. Although the Gibeonites had deceived the Israelites, Joshua was true to his word, and he led the men of war south from Gilgal. So you can't just go, well, you could, but not with a large army straight across. So they go around Jericho, then up towards, the road goes towards Jerusalem, and then they went northwest at the end, which is all very interesting because it brings them in right behind the Amorites. The Amorites are not expecting them that quickly. So they come in on the exposed flanks of the Amorites who are camped around Gibeon. So this is a 50 to 60 kilometre march. Now remember I said that we'll be doing some running tonight. Well, this is that bit, which is about 8 to 12 hours of marching. Look, the Romans could do well over 30 kilometres in a day in good order, probably more if they really needed to. The Saxon army in the year 1066 went from London to York and back, fighting a battle at Stamford Bridge, and did that pretty quickly. So these people are a lot fitter than we are, and they can move a lot further, a lot quicker. But this is still a little bit of a stretch. So I'm thinking they started about midday on one day, and they arrive in amongst the Amorite camp during the early morning hours the next morning. The Lord had promised victory to Joshua. Joshua chapter 10 verse 8, and the Lord said unto Joshua, fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand, shall not a man of them stand before thee, not even a giant. I added that bit, by the way. the Israelites quickly destroyed the Amorite positions encamped around Gideon, and as the Israelites had come in from the east or even the southeast, up the road from Jericho, they'd cut off the Amorites from their home cities in the south. So they come in this way and they're here, and all the Amorites live here. So how do they get back home again? We want to actually, can we go forward now, Rachel? Ah, there we go. We'll leave it there. That's a great map. Where are we up to? The defeated Amorite armies fled in a northerly and westerly direction with the bulk of their men funneling onto the road to Beth Horon. So there's Beth Horon. It's mainly westerly, isn't it, from Gibeon. There's a road, and they're on that. The Israelites are chasing them. And then they cut through here. There's no road there, they just run through the fields, and they link up with another road through here. So this is the valley of Ajalon through here, which we're about to talk about. Having fled the 10 kilometres from Gibeon to Beth Horon in great panic, the Amorites then headed for home. So they get out of the way here, and then they start heading south as best they can. They turned southwest, ran down through the fields past modern-day Latrun, which was significant in the 1948 war. The Arab Legion held the Israelis up there. Very easy to hold up an enemy in the Judean hills, lots of choke points. Then the Amorites fled along the road or across the fields towards Azekah, 40 kilometres away from Beth Horon, and the exhausted Israelites probably having trouble keeping up with them. So the Lord intervenes. So they're running down through this valley here, and the Lord sends in some thunderstorms off the Mediterranean. In fact, it started even back here. And they're getting hit by great hailstones. Did I miss something, Rachel? No. That's all right. No worries. Great hailstones off the Mediterranean as they're running along this road and then down through that valley. Now Joshua is at Gibeon here, and there's another road down through here, and somewhere here he gets on a peak, maybe there, and he looks back to Gibeon and he says, "Sun, stand there." And the moon, it was daytime, but the moon we can often see during the daytime. The moon was over the valley of Ajalon. And he says, "Moon, you stop there. Sun, you stop there." I think it's about 11 in the morning, just judging on where he was and where the sun was in the sky. Perhaps modern day Beit Mir is where he was standing. I just picked out a prominence in that area, overlooking the valley of Ajalon. Joshua sensed that many of the Amorites would escape into the darkness in about 7 hours' time, and so he asked the Lord to press pause on the daylight. We see that in Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 to 14. It's about 11 a.m. at this point. So the sun is back behind Joshua to the east over Gibeon, and the moon is in front of Joshua to the west over the valley of Ajalon. And as I was saying, the moon is often visible during the daytime. Now this pause gave the Israelites an extra 24 hours of sunlight. Joshua chapter 10 verse 14 says, "And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel." So they had 31 hours, not 7 hours, to finish off the pursuit. The surviving Amorites fanned out, and many of them fled southeast toward the wilderness. I'm not quite happy with that location of Makkedah. I'm thinking it might be further this way. So they get to Azekah and they head that way towards the Judean wilderness. Among them were the 5 kings of the Amorites. We see that in Joshua chapter 10 verse 16. It says, "But these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah." However, they were spotted as they entered. So some of the Israelites saw them go in. There must have been some of the Israelites that were really focused on getting those guys. Joshua says to them, "You get those guys." And so they see them go in. The Israelites trapped the kings in the cave with great boulders while they dealt with everything else, and they came back to it. They pursued the Amorites in all directions until they reached their fenced cities, and they inflicted a tremendous slaughter on them. And then the armies of Israel assembled at Makkedah and executed the Amorite kings. Well, having severely weakened the entire Amorite civilization of the south, why not destroy them now? Well, God will sometimes bring a great alliance of the wicked together so that they are easier to destroy. We see this in Joel chapter 3 verse 2, talking about the Armageddon campaign. This is certainly what happened with the Amorite attack on Gibeon. Now think about it, if the Amorites had stayed in their cities, Israel would have had to move through these areas that are difficult to invade because the hill country is easy to block people. And they would have had to deal with these cities one by one. But now that the Amorites had all come together and been defeated in battle, they were severely weakened, and many of their warriors were dead in the fields to the north. And so Israel immediately set to the complete destruction of the Amorite cities. You can see them there, Makkedah, Libnah, Lachish. Lachish is famous because the Babylonians destroyed it late in the kingdom period of 2 Kings. There's Lachish, Libnah, Eglon, Makkedah, Hebron. These are the places that were destroyed. And Debir. They all fell in quick succession. We see that in Joshua chapter 10 verses 28 to 43. Perhaps within a single week, which is quite remarkable. Normally a siege would take weeks or months for one city, but this is, because they're so weakened, there's so few soldiers left, there's so many being killed, that the Israelites just cleaned them all up in a week. And this was the complete and utter annihilation of Amorite civilization in southern Canaan. What does it say in Joshua chapter 10 verse 40? Joshua smote all the country of the hills and of the south and of the vale and of the springs, and all their kings he left none remaining. So they did the right thing in this context, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord God of Israel commanded. And once this slaughter was accomplished, the Israelites returned to their base at Gilgal, Joshua chapter 10 verse 43. Now, a couple of little bits of information. It may be that some of the Amorites had fled north of Beth Horon and avoided pursuit by Israel. So most of them fled along this road to Beth Horon, but maybe some went that way. And as most of them went this way, that's where the Israelites pursued. Why do I say that? They would have waited to head back south until after the Israelites had returned to Gilgal, and then they would have survived. Again, why do I say that? Judges chapter 1 verses 34 to 36. There is an Amorite stronghold at Mount Heres, which is about there. So there's some surviving Amorites into the book of Judges. And they give the tribe of Dan a hard time. And as for Jerusalem, which also was taken at this time, the Jebusites move in, because Israel took it, killed everybody, and then left. And some Jebusites were a bit entrepreneurial, and they took over Jerusalem, and they were there until the time of King David. So it had been an Amorite city, it became a Jebusite city. I feel like the Israelites messed up, but maybe the Lord was just setting Jerusalem aside for David. Maybe we should see it that way. All right, one more campaign, the Northern Campaign. Let's just go back to that picture actually, Rachel. That's what's left of Lake Hula in northern Israel. Maybe, I think it's northern Israel. That's an important body of water. Yes, we'll have the map now, please. I don't agree with everything on this map, but it's not too bad. All right, before Israel arrived, the Amorites had been the fearsome occupiers of the southern hill country and the wilderness of Canaan, the plain of Moab, and the high plateau lands of Bashan. So the Amorites were bit of a energetic type of people. They invaded Mesopotamia, Sumer and places like that fairly early on. Hammurabi was Amorite. So the third great civilization in Mesopotamia after the Sumerians and the Akkadians was the Amorites. They had a lot of success in the area around Haran and on the fringes of Canaan. And by the time that Israel gets into Canaan, they've done quite well for themselves. So the Amorites, until this time, were actually doing pretty well. And they would take on the big boys, so to speak. They'd take on the Babylonians and the Assyrians. And they also occupied a number of cities in the north of Canaan. Now the campaigns of Moses and Joshua had destroyed all the Amorite kingdoms south of Gibeon and east of the Jordan River. And the Canaanites in the north took note of Israel's success with great alarm. Now, if you read carefully, Joshua chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, they're even mobilising their forces before the fall of Jericho. Straight after the fall of Jericho, before the Battle of Gibeon. Joshua chapter 9, verse 1 and 2. It came to pass when all the kings which were on this side Jordan, in the hills and in the valleys and in all the coasts of the great sea over against Lebanon, the Hittite and the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite and the Jebusite, heard thereof. What did they hear? This was the fall of Jericho and the fall of Ai. That they gathered themselves together to fight with Joshua and with Israel with one accord. So they're mobilising. They're already getting together. King Jabin of Hazor had enjoyed hegemony. Now hegemony is just where you don't conquer them, but you kind of control them. So he was the top dog up in the north. He issued a call for a general muster of all the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Hivites who lived in the northern hill country, or who lived in the plains south of the Sea of Galilee, or Chinneroth, and the coastal plain, Lebanon and Syria. We see all that in Joshua chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. Now, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? A great army like Israel's can only be defeated by an even larger army. These armies are massive size for ancient warfare. The allied force, which was brought together by King Jabin of Hazor, was an immense horde. What does it say in verse 4 of chapter 11? And they went out, they and all their host with them, much people, even as the sand that is upon the seashore in multitudes, with horses and chariots, very many. And when all these kings were met together, they came and pitched together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. Now, if you've got an army that numbers into the hundreds of thousands, you're going to need a large freshwater source. There it is, Lake Hula, known in the book of Joshua as the waters of Merom. Now, somebody said that Merom was there. Now, I don't know why, but I'd say somebody a long time ago on a map that didn't have the topography just went, well, that's about the middle of the north, and put a dot there, and everyone's copied them ever since. I have no idea why you would take hundreds of thousands of people and try to camp there. For one thing, how do you get out again with all those people? All these hills here. There's a lot of water, and it could be 500,000 soldiers. You need a big body of water. And look, it's so flat around here. Good for camping, good for fighting. Good for chariots. This is not good chariot country. Anyway, like I said, I think someone did it once and everyone else has just copied ever since. One outstanding feature of this army was the vast multitudes of chariots which it fielded. The Israelites had never faced chariots before, so there was some consternation about that prospect. No one wants to get run over by a chariot. But God reassured them. Joshua chapter 11 verse 6 says, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, Be not afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time will I deliver them up all slain before Israel. Thou shalt hoe their horses and burn their chariots with fire." So the hoeing or hocking of the horses was a way to make them lame and probably to kill them. Hamstring, is it?
Every time,
Cut the tendon, yeah.
every time I hear that word, it hurts.
Yeah, it sends a shudder through you. Yeah. Well, the great army of the Northern Coalition assembled on the plains out around the waters of Merom, which I've identified as... That's not there anymore, by the way. They've drained that for agricultural purposes. I mean, there's still plenty of marshland there, but the lake itself is not what it used to be. This is only a few kilometres north of the city of Hazor. I mean, surely this gives it away. This guy calls everybody to his place to get ready. He's not going to do it there, is he? He's going to do it right here or there, next to the big body of fresh water. The plan of King Jabin of Hazor was to assemble his allies in this large open area, organise this enormous force, and then march south to crush the Israelites. However, the Israelites marched up from Gilgal very quickly. Rachel, have we got another map? Right, so there's Gilgal. And there, this is today, so you can see the lake's not there anymore. So up to there, 150 k's. You'd think if you were the Canaanites, you'd be safe, at least for a little while. But Israelites march fast. So this is basically that. And we can see, there's where the lake was, that's where Hazor was. Mount Hermon is there, and that valley we're about to Mizpah, where they ran through, some of them is there. Anyway, so Israel's marched very quickly up to deal with them. Speaking of the Israelite march up from Gilgal, 150 kilometres away, caught Jabin and his allies by surprise, and the chariots, which was such a focus, never a factor in the battle as the Israelites attacked the Canaanites and their allies while they were still in the camp.
In the camp, is that
In the camp. They never had a chance to deploy. And, if you have a choice between having a better army and attacking before your enemy deploys, you take that one every time, because it doesn't matter how good your army is. The Scots did this a few times to the English. The English usually had a better army. But, a couple of times the Scots caught them before they were deployed and beat them. Very famous Bannockburn, Stirling, these sort of battles. Yeah.
Same use of the topography as well. You know,
Yeah.
the English would have had heavy horse and
Yeah.
the Highlanders just
The
disappeared.
principles of
in the mist.
warfare do not
Yeah.
change, just
That's
the,
right.
the costumes. So Joshua came, and we know that they didn't give them a chance to deploy, because Joshua chapter 11 verse 7 tells us, Joshua came and all the people of war with him against him by the waters of Merom suddenly. So suddenly Israel turns up, they're not expected, and they fell upon them. Now this is descriptive of, they get there and they attack before, like the Canaanites and their allies are still in their tents. They're probably trying to form up as they're being attacked. Another great slaughter ensued as the Israelites chased their enemy to the north to Zidon, to the east along the valley of Mizpah. So the north to Zidon, where are we? There, so they went, Zidon's about there. To the east along the valley of Mizpah, that way. This is quite mountainous here. To the west coast to Mizri Foth Maim. Take your time saying that one, so that's about there. So they just went in every direction. We see that in Joshua 11 verse 8. By this time, the organised power bases of the kingdoms of Canaan had been completely shattered. So any organised resistance, any major organised resistance to Israel was gone. Nobody was going to stand up to Joshua. Now, there was limited local resistance, and you'll see that in the book of Judges next week. Not next week, in 3 weeks' time. There's a good note. No Bible history for 2 weeks, not until school goes back. Now, and Israel at this point has a choice. How much are we going to win? We're going to win. How much? How far are we going to push these victories? And in disobedience to God's direct commands, they got sick of winning. Israel failed in 2 significant ways. Firstly, they failed to completely mop up those enemies who had fled and survived the battles. They allowed survivors. They weren't supposed to allow survivors. They balked at totally destroying them. They gave them the Gideon deal and made them their slaves. But they were supposed to destroy them. Secondly, they failed to push further north up to the Euphrates or down into Philistia. Now, if we look here, the Euphrates is well off the map to the north, the northeast. And this is about as far as they go, about Mount Hermon. They don't really go any further north. And down here, Philistia, they don't take out Philistia either. It's not until David, King David, is the one that conquers the Philistines. So they failed. Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 7 told them that they were to do those 2 things, go to the Euphrates and go down past Philistia. And these sins of omission were condemned by the Lord. We'll see that in Judges chapter 2 verses 1 to 5 next week. Well, we'll better stop there.
Why do you think they didn't? Do you have an opinion?
They
I
were
mean,
weary.
just
They were just weary of the work. Why do we not completely do everything we should? Why do we stop at a level of righteousness when we could go further? You just grow weary of it, and in the end you just don't quite do what you should do. And then the deficit builds and the problems build, and if you squashed it completely, you wouldn't have had the problem at all, but because you didn't, it re-emerges. I think Joshua could only do so much as in physically speaking, and we'll see the failure of the tribes without him next week, 3 weeks, the first part of that. Any other questions? We'll fix those up in a minute, maybe we might close them.
Well, there was
Go on, yep.
sorry, at lifting the siege of Gibeon,
Yes.
the decision was made to blank Gibeon. What? No, they didn't do it.
Attack.
Oh, yeah, it's not Gibeon, it's the other guy, it's the Hivites. So is that what it is? The decision was made to attack Gibeon? Lifting the siege of Gibeon.
Yeah. Destroyed.
Destroy, okay, and then the next blank. Although the Gibeonites had deceived the Israelites, Joshua was true to his word. The Israelites arrived unexpectedly in the rear. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, came in behind them. Best place to attack people. Alright, let's pray and we'll finish up. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for these historical records, but these spiritual lessons, and Lord, I pray we go back and mine this rich territory of Bible truth. May you bless us